So please welcome to the stage Valy from Econox Laos, Qiyun from the Weird and Wild, Eva from QuotaClimat, and Aude from 2050NOW. Hello, hello. Very formal with the handshake. Hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, welcome to the stage, everybody. It's really, really excited to have you here. I've been especially looking forward to this session. We've got a really great range of perspectives. Now, I could introduce you guys, but I'm not going to. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to introduce yourselves, maybe talking about a bit about your journey to date and where you currently work. Should we start with you?
Right. Hello, ChangeNOW, and thank you very much for having me and having us on this wonderful stage. So my name is Valy. I'm from Laos, a small landlocked country in Southeast Asia. And I'm a co-founder and the CEO of Econox Laos. We run also a media platform called Econews Laos, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about it later. And I am an ecologist and environmental journalist who has zero background on media before, which I'm going to also be happy to talk about it. And thank you very much for having me.
Hi, everybody. My name is Aude Baron. I'm French, and I'm the editor-in-chief of a very new media that is called 2050NOW. So it's a bit connected to ChangeNOW. And it's a video media dedicated to ecological transition, and we are going to focus on solutions, on what is known, that is science, and what is being done, that is through the company, so that we can inspire people and help them to act.
Hi, my name is Qiyun. I'm from Singapore, so also from Southeast Asia. I run an Instagram account called The Weird and Wild. I don't have my visuals here, but if you go on Instagram and search The Weird and Wild, there's a visual preview of the work that I do. My background is in environmental science, but I believe in using visuals, colors, and really just social media to talk about climate issues in a way that explains the complexity so that we're not trying to oversimplify the issues, but also show what Southeast Asia is going to face from climate change and also what we can offer when it comes to solutions. So yeah, very excited. I'm a self-taught illustrator, so everything that you see online is what I picked up on YouTube and from other inspirations online, and I'm very excited to be here.
And you've got some very cool stickers as well to give around to people.
Yes.
So.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eva Morel. I'm French, and I co-founded the NGO QuotaClimat that works on improving but also increasing the media coverage of climate-related issues, because we see the direct link between political action, citizen action, and the action of companies and the way media talk about climate. So this is why we do what we do.
Nice. Well, we've got some fans in the audience. Look, the science is clear. We know what the problems are. We know what our global challenges are. Do you think the quality of communications from the media reflects the severity of the problem? Maybe we can start with you, Eva.
Yeah, so the short answer is no, it absolutely doesn't. I think the first problem we see in the media is that the journalists tend to fail to make the link between what we see, the consequences of the climate crisis, of global warming, meaning the floodings, heat waves, storms, and the causes of what is going on. And because we tend to fail to see the link, people don't understand and don't perceive the solutions at every levels, so at individual levels, but also as political leaders, economic leaders. And so the first issue for us would be to explain more directly what's going on, to make the logical links between causes, consequences, and solutions. The second thing I would like to emphasize is maybe to less depict the global warming issue as distant from us. So we see in general media a lot of images portraying the consequences of the crisis as really dehumanized. For example, we have this common image of the white bear on its high flow. It's very distant, and it doesn't represent the vast spectrum of consequences we're going to face, and we're already facing in every territory on the planet. So I think it's important to link the climate crisis to everyone's everyday life, to make people want to act at their level. And maybe the last thing I would like to emphasize as a problem that's really prevalent in the media is that we tend to give speech, to give a voice and visibility to interest representatives and polemists instead of experts and activists, for example, that have the common good at heart. And that's a problem because we overemphasize their voice and we tend to perceive them as neutral, where they're not neutral, in fact. They're defending really really detrimental to the climate crisis interests. And so this is why we try to work on that subject.
And Valy, there's not many polar bears in Laos. Yeah. So what is media coverage like there, and do you kind of agree with that statement?
Right, for sure. I think I agree with Eva on that. And especially, I want to share this because when we first started, I think we published one article about plastic waste. And, we feature these photos of the sea turtles being, impacted by these plastic waste, plastic straws. And then we spotted some comments of our youth saying, see, this is the problem that you are using plastic straw, and he tagged his friend. And then the friend came and answered but we are a landlocked country. Why should I care about it? I think that's important as well, and it reflects so much about how people in Laos and also people, especially the young ones, have this understanding, the knowledge about the climate change, plastic crisis, and more. And I think that's also why we would love to focus more on the, simplifying also science into something that is more concise, easy to access, and attractive, I would say, especially for the young people, young generation to be more involved in this topic, because, for example, even though we are a landlocked country, but the Mekong River that flows from the very north to the very south of the country is one of the top 10 most polluted river that dump plastic waste into the ocean every year. So that's also one of the facts, that we try to push out there to educate people more about this, that we are not isolated from the world, we are a part of the planet.
Yeah, that out of sight, out of mind problem is definitely at the heart of this. Aude, I'm interested to know, do you think that we're getting desensitized to these important issues from the media?
It's not only about media, it's also about the consumption of the media. And what we observe is that there is a trend. People, especially the youth, the 18, 24 years old, they tend to inform themselves more and more through social media, through TikTok. So the consequence is that there might be a confusion between content creation and information, another confusion between opinion and facts. And this is where we have a key role, and we need to be present, to be there, to show people that there is a huge difference, as Eva was saying, between polemists and journalists. So that's a major challenge, and honestly, we are not perfect. And if young, they tend to consume more information on TikTok, there is obviously a reason, and we have a huge questioning for themselves, for ourselves.
Very interesting. Look, this climate movement is all doomism. It's academic, it's full of fear. It's just sometimes a bit dull as well. Qiyun, how do we make it more interesting? How do we make it less boring?
Yeah, for me, I chose social media because it was precisely where myself and a lot of my peers were getting information. But I think for what I do, when I do illustrations, the reason was I needed a more visual way to be telling people the same stories that you would read on the news. Because sometimes, I don't know how many people in the audience still open a newspaper, or most people are scrolling online. And when you see thousands of words, you might feel very overwhelmed. Because sometimes you don't understand words like the IPCC, you don't understand atmospheric or anthropogenic. These are terms that you would get if you're in the scene. But if you're outside, you're just creating barriers to people who maybe work as a software engineer or as a banker for their lives, but don't actually read about climate change. So I try to use comics as a softer way, because people assume comics are for children. But the biggest audience of my comics on social media are people aged 18 to 40. And that says to me that when they see comics, they see it as accessible. They see this as information that they can use in life and at work. And I've done pieces on blue carbon, on bacteria, on the IPCC reports. And I use bright colors, I use cute characters, because I think when I use these characters, I'm asking the same questions that people are asking in their heads. These are questions like, I don't know what greenhouse gas is. And if you have to search through so many articles online, you feel like, oh, there's just so much effort to get to this point of knowing what climate is all about. So for me, entertainment or visually exciting things will help them hopefully use art to get into the climate movement.
And just to be complimentary, I think there is something very important. It's to go where people are, that is on social platforms, and to adapt the fun storytelling, because all of us, we don't want to bring boring content, because climate change is super challenging for every one of us. And if you add some boring and cold content, you will lose people. So I think we really need to use the narrative tools that are trending and to adapt them for information.
So go to the source of attention, and comics are going to save the world, everyone. Epic.
I hope.
Hopefully. Valy, the language of climate is very academic, and in many places in the world there is a lack to quality access of media. How do we reduce the limitations in people engaging with climate and generally becoming more media literate?
Right. I think like the same, trying to use social media first as a platform to spread, knowledge and awareness about environmental protection. But anyway, taking Laos into, context, a lot of people, I think now still 70% of Lao people are still living in the rural areas.
Yep.
But they're being the one who being impacted most from the climate change and like all of these environmental problems. So what we do is that not just only Econews, we are a part of environmental education alliance in Laos, and we work also on developing media and communication tools and materials to help on these projects of the outreach to the people in the rural area. So we use media, different kind of medias, such as the community radio, even short films that would engage the people in the rural to understand more about climate change. Because to be honest, we have this Lao word called "lok hon," meaning like hot world, and people just hear about it, but not really understanding, and they do not aware much as well of why this is happening in the world and how they are going to be affected by it, because most of them are still relying on the nature to live.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's really interesting. We obviously have a large-scale increase in conservation globally, but often things like large-scale rewilding isn't funded locally. But that has, in many situations, caused confrontation to rural locals. How do we get different people to engage with media locally in those rural areas and make sure that the efforts from a wider perspective of conservation are being understood and then engaged with locals so that there isn't friction?
I mean, at the same time, because we are lucky enough to still have the work on the ground, on the field, we meet with the local people and help them with many projects to preserve their natural resources, such as watershed, forest, wetland. And with that, we also try to portray these to the world by, capturing and interviewing also the local people, have them say about what's, they're facing in their daily life, trying to survive, fighting, wildlife or even non-timber forest product to feed their family. So I think that's also something valuable. Yeah. We want the world to also see what's going on in the rural of Laos and how they are being affected through our platform as well.
So make it matter to them.
Yeah, and just one more thing I wanted to add, being in Laos, a socialist country with less, with limitation of the freedom of speech, Econews, it's also interesting that Econews is using different communication methods to kind of get the information out there and influence the decision makers to take action. Like in Laos, we cannot really point the finger that, oh, why you're not tackling this problem? We're going to be in jail, we're going to be locked up. So, for example, we do one article and a post about, who is the owner of this trash, and it's actually the, a plastic waste at Patusai. It's like the, how can you call it, the Triumph, the Champs-Élysées area, but nobody is taking care of it. So after publishing about that, the next day, the waste was like gone. Somebody was taking care of it. So just an example of how using media in Laos in the right way would also push changes, apart from being able to directly say to the government.
Yeah, really interesting.
I wanted to add on because exactly what Valy said, Southeast Asia activism and advocacy just looks very different from elsewhere, where you're not holding signs, you're not protesting because it becomes dangerous or it's illegal. And the media or social media becomes a way to democratize a lot of the information that can go out there. When you are talking about certain things that might be unpalatable, the first thing is I know that my audience will not take a picture of me holding a sign very well compared to me saying the exact same thing, but with a green blob that says it instead of me. So if I say, hey, this is the trajectory of my country when it comes to hitting the net zero, this is what the UN says, and I show you the difference, you're more likely to then ask questions on why is it so, rather than if I tell you, look at the gap, because they don't take well to that kind of messaging. So I see even things like visuals or alternative forms of communications, and tweaking our message requires also a lot of contextual understanding. And for me in Singapore, I've also thought about how not everyone speaks English, and I know some of us here are not native English speakers. So making sure that content is adaptable to other languages would also be important when it comes to reaching more people.
Well, that's really interesting, because you have this very rare ability to have both sides of the brain, which are both kind of artistic as well as technical and academic. As someone who's fascinated by that intersection of climate technology and communications, as well as having a very rich ability to do visual storytelling, is there a balance needed to make sure that we don't simplify the message too much, to make sure that there's mass engagement, but we almost don't go in depth enough on the actual message itself? Do you have that balance?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head, because when I talk about something like anthropogenic, I make sure Instagram only limits us to 10 slides, which means I have to decide, okay, I have a cover image, where do I want to place my attention on? And I know that not everyone understands something like what is anthropogenic climate change. So maybe I need to set the second page to be, okay, before you read the rest of this post, this is what you need to first understand. But it's also the kind of thing where you need to also think about whether this piece of content can be split into 4 or 5 pieces. I think most of us, when we're nodding here, is that we cannot squeeze everything into one Instagram post. So it's also thinking about how do we strategize it such that if I create this content now, I can create something else later that references this so that it's always evergreen, and we create a resource rather than a piece of information that just gets used once and then lost in the abyss of social media. So I also do a lot of work supporting companies when it comes to measuring their emissions and decarbonizing. And something that I also learn in that space is that people don't understand things like scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, where does their emission sources come from. And there's so much advocacy needed on that end, and I hope that even not just people are working in that space, but when the masses understand these things, they're better able to read things like annual reports, sustainability reports, because if they can't come to a conclusion on whether a company is doing good or not, I don't think it really helps if an activist comes and says, this is bad or that is bad. They need to know why. And when they can come to their own conclusion, I think that change lasts a bit longer than if someone else tells them what to think.
That's a really good point. So that evergreen content being almost a gateway to further stuff. Eva, big question here.
Ready.
How do we move from climate science being treated as an opinion rather than a fact?
That's a big question. And just to touch upon what was being said, I think the best way to keep touch with journalists as an activist and as someone that wants to put forward climate action is to make people realize there is a performative effect with information. It's not just informing people just to make them understand. Information has actually impacts on the ground, like on projects, on political programs, stuff like that. And I think it's important to realize this responsibility journalists and media have. And to answer your question regarding the difference between facts and opinions, I think there is a problem in journalism with the norm of the norm of balance, making journalists want to balance everything with a contrarian opinion. And so the journalists do that with climate experts. They portray climate science as antagonists to some other contrarians that would say the reverse, and that's actually detrimental to the understanding of the scientific consensus, because we perceive it as not actually a consensus within the scientific community, and it makes people think facts are actually opinions. So I think there is a huge role to play within media to educate journalists to not treat the same opinions and scientific facts, and specifically regarding climate science, because actually worldwide it's 40% of the population that doesn't believe climate change is of human origin. So that's really terrifying. And I think the second thing is that we talked a lot about social media. But actually, social media is also a danger with information. There is a lot of disinformation going around, and it's growing at the moment, also with the emergence of artificial intelligence. And so we need to fight also this disinformation in parallel to informing people about climate issues. And so there is a need to build also this consensus regarding the fact of creating a regulatory framework surrounding climate disinformation, and it concerns social media, but also traditional media. And I know it's not really accepted with journalists, because journalists are attached to the freedom of speech and the fact of operating within a totally deregulated environment. But because this information is growing, we need to adapt and to put this issue forward.
Yeah, really interesting. And look, I don't know about you, and it depends on which algorithm or source that you're engaging with, but we are pretty tuned in to quite negative stories consistently. Aude, do you believe there's a genuine appetite for us as citizens to engage with that more positive, hope-driven story, or are we more trained to negative narratives now?
Well, there is hope for positivity, otherwise we would not be there. But there is something very important to be aware of. It is called the negativity bias, and we are all concerned by this one. So we human, our brain is trained to filter information. And what we will remember the most, it is what endanger our future, that is danger, threat, fear, and all those negative content or news. So when you read some content on social media or other platforms, you will read some positive news, you will read them and forget them right away. Even the seconds after, there is a negative piece of content. So it means that when many people say, oh, in media you talk only about negative fact, it's not totally true, because this is the only thing is that you will remember what is negative. So what we need to work on is how to engage people on positive content. And it's pretty difficult, but that's why we need to rely on people, on incarnation, on people that will inspire you, and on solution. And to me, what is key, it's not to blame, because in this huge environmental transition, very often we emphasize more on what we should not do or what we can't do anymore. Honestly, if I tell you, all of you guys, stop doing this, this is super boring. But if I tell you, you can do this, that will be better, there you want to go in this path. So, and that's why, well, I hope we are going to try, because we were only born 3 weeks ago, but we are going to try to share solutions, what is known, what is done. And all of you here, maybe we'll have contact later, because if we show what is done, that's a great inspiration, and it's much easier to follow someone rather than to be a pioneer and open your own path.
And what is next for 2050 now? I know you've just launched. You probably want to get as many people here to engage with it. What's next?
What's next for
2050 now?
Oh, for 2050. Keep growing. No, what's next is to find the right balance and to show what I think the right balance, so that we show people what is being done at large scale, because this is a worldwide issue, and also at individual scale. And I think the balance between both is really key.
Brilliant. Well, look, we've just had a little notification there saying that we're running out of time. So I'm going to have to ask one last question, unfortunately. I think we could have talked for hours and hours. But have you got any tips for people in the audience to better engage with media and almost get closer to better informative content? Should we start at the end?
Yeah, I would say to try and diversify the maximum you can your sources of information, because nowadays people consume between 5 and 10 sources of information, and it's actually quite low to get out of our bubbles and to understand the diversity of what people are thinking about climate change, and that's critical in understanding why people are acting, for some groups of people who are, and why people are blocking at some stage, and try and unlock those obstacles.
I think I totally agree with that. And one thing that I will do on my platform right after this, if you're already on it, is that there's so much context in Southeast Asia that's very different when it comes to understanding sustainability and climate. And there are so many content creators and journalists from our region that is doing great work trying to spread this information. So if you could diversify the media that you're consuming and also the people that are producing content, I think that's the biggest. And the next thing is that this is an area, science communications, that is very much underfunded in Southeast Asia. It's very new, and we need more people putting money to support people creating this content so that we constantly get a fresh new perspective on what's going on in the world.
And I would say, on my perspective, just make a break. When you are on social platforms, if you see something that strikes your brain, just, rather than going on the other content, think about it. And as we were saying a few minutes ago, rather than being, on your negativity bias, just try, to integrate that what you've just read, what you've just seen, can be positive.
I totally agree with all, but I just want to add in a little bit, like in Econews, we are also having fun with experimenting different kinds of, using communications and medias. And I think nowadays with everybody have, media, the power to post, to share in your hands, you can make changes by, sharing about the problems, about solutions that you care and about, and for your community to be more aware of. And I think it's simple. I mean, if you are not on social media, this year we also experiment with, board games, using arts for conservation, podcasts, and more. So I think explore your interest and what is right for you. You can use that to also educate yourself and the people in your community. If your parents, you can also use card game, flashcards for your next generation to be more aware about the problem, about wildlife, for example. Yeah, I think it's very fun to play in the media, playground, and I'm happy to continue further.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. And look, clearly the time is ticking. Clearly communications is at the heart of making change happen. Let's go to where the attention is. Let's make the credible information creative, and let's diversify the media that we consume. Thank you so much, everybody. Let's give a round of applause. Thank you.